What's up people, I'm Potato Noir coming at you with a fresh clay farm design. So this clay farm produces about 12.5 stacks of clay every 45 minutes, and it's primarily used for people who already have mud, although if you have a small mud maker, you can actually put it at the beginning of this piston pusher. So the way this farm works is you input all your mud and it goes into this giant piston feed tape, because to make the most amount of mud, you want to maximize the surface area that the clay or the mud is on top of the dripstone here. Most people wouldn't need more than around 12.5 stacks of clay per 45 minutes, so I feel like this is a pretty good balance of form and function. And additionally, if you don't want to make an entirety of 6 layers, you could take out a few and have the top be at 4 or 2, depending on what you want, but it needs to be an even number, because as you can see, the piston feed tape goes back, and the very top here, the very last block is on this side. This farm also has a smart detection system at the very end, so whenever the final layer goes into here, this clay will activate this redstone circuit, which will then activate this vertical redstone signal that will send the pulse down, locking the first level of the piston feed tape and also stopping this timer. This system only exists because a smart zero-tick piston does not work on my server for whatever reason. So if you don't know what a smart zero-tick piston is at all and you are very scared by those words, you could just build it as it is here and it will work perfectly. If smart piston feed tapes work on your server, you can just take out all of this redstone right here. You can take out this T flip-flop and this redstone line and this repeater right here, and you can just replace all of that with a smart piston feed tape right underneath this block, and it will still work. The way that my design works is I have to use this comparator clock to push this piston really fast because it won't do it the other way. So this configuration of the farm is simulated that you've already pushed everything through, so let me go ahead real quick and clear this out to simulate pushing all the blocks through without actually doing it. Alright, so say this is what it would be like if you just had exactly one more layer for your farm. So let me go ahead and start the machine. So that pulse up there has just sent the pulse down, which will unlock this these pistons right here and also reset this T flip-flop. And so this will now work if we push this. And obviously you'd be putting mud here. So once I put this through, whenever it detects that last block at the top, here, let me break this for a second for some peace and quiet. Whenever I push this through, it'll automatically send everything up one more layer, like it would be on the very last tick, and then it'll read that, send the signal down to stop this clock right here. So let's get that annoying piston back in. So you'd be placing this whole time, and it's gone through and it's observing, and then it stops the system, stops this clock right here. So then you'd wait for it to completely dry. Let me speed up the random tick speed real fast. And you'll see all that will be drying. Takes just a little bit, and then alright, good, everything should be good. Set it back to default of 3. And so at this point, you would mine all the blocks out. I would recommend with Silk Touch instead of Fortune, because you don't actually get extra clay balls. You just get enough to make exactly one block. So I would recommend mining this with Silk Touch and not with Fortune. So then you go and mine everything up. And once again, like I said, once you hit this here, it will reset and unlock at the bottom, and then you can once again push things through. A few things to note about this farm. Right here, we have a kind of a smart observer here, because we don't want just a normal little redstone circuit with a torch underneath to send this pulse. And we also don't want just an observer looking into this block, because then the observer would observe the piston pushing and create an infinite loop of these pistons just pushing forever over and over again, which is really annoying. So what we have is a little wall, and whenever this last block gets here, it'll make this wall update, which will send a signal through this observer, which will then send a pulse to all the pistons to begin the piston feed tape system. So over here, for each layer, you'll have, we'll look at this one because it's a little bit different from the others, but for each layer, you'll have one observer and one target block. And this target block is to kind of speed up the system just by a few marginal ticks that are necessary for this farm to complete on time. TLDR, the target blocks are necessary for the timing. Make the timing just a little bit faster so that an extra block doesn't get pushed through the whole thing. This daylight detector by Raise works is incredibly smart and works by this, actually yes, this daylight detector observing whether it has a block on top of it or not, and that is depending on that signal over there. And so that sends this vertical signal down, and it will work regardless of day or night because of this other sensor inputting into this comparator here. So the way the feed tape works is whenever this wall is pushed, this is the exact number of the maximum amount of blocks that this piston can push. So this is a 12 by 12 exactly right here. So this will push all these 12 blocks directly to where that last one will be over the top of that piston that is down. And when it does that, this observer, he's a little hidden right here, will input a signal which will travel through this target block, which will redirect the redstone to exactly 15 pulses right here. And so then that whole system travels up through the whole thing over and over and over again, a few ticks until the very end where it will complete the circuit. This vertical section works exactly the same way with an observer and target block going through exactly 15 redstone strength to the end there. Now, I've designed this farm to where whenever you have inputted all the layers, you can walk around on them. This is due to the fact that you want to be able to check on where your clay is dried and not dried. You can actually use glass and it still dries out the clay, so it's a little bit better to see both layers at a time. It's a little bit less annoying if you have an elytra, or if you just are looking around to see which block is still hanging around and make it to where you can't harvest all your clay. So the ladders give pretty easy access also if you don't have an elytra, and these blocks here prevent all these clays from flying everywhere off the side when you're mining, and you don't want your clay to go everywhere. Just be careful at the very top. Make sure you don't break this redstone, because once again this makes a circuit that detects when this last block is here. So just be careful not to mess it up at the very end. So who is this farm for? This farm is primarily for people who already have a mud farm. However, you can put a little mud pusher in right here to my right to the left of me. But the thing is, most mud pushers, if they're that small, are very slow. So I have another design that I will show in here in just a second that actually makes the mud quite fast. And I found that this is the fastest way for me to do the massive amounts of dirt. So I just AFK the dirt in that other machine, which will TNT it, and then it will be plugged into this design here. And because this design only makes around 12.5, 13 stacks, and that is before all of the vertical walls are inputted. So keep that in mind because there might be a little bit of extra blocks there. But because this design only makes about 12.5 stacks, you only need to have that amount of mud in your inventory when you're filling it up, right? So you won't have to AFK here. You'll just have to bring that amount of mud to this farm, and then it will spread it out for you to come pick up later. So you don't need a item dispenser here or anything. This is only because that doesn't work on my server, and I thought I'd give an option for anyone else out there if they're having that same experience. Now, something that's really cool about this vertical signal right here, this stops the farm after you have already completed the end of the circuit at the top, and this pulse is exactly 1 redstone longer than the observer pulse, which will push these pistons up. So that observer pulse stops exactly right here. So the configuration, whenever you're about to start the machine, as in you're about to start pushing everything here, you'll want this block in the bottom dropper, and you'll want this redstone should not be powered. So that means that this block right here should not be directly above this daylight detector. It should be exactly 1 block to the right. And this would not be powered because you don't have any blocks there yet. So the block would be right here. That wouldn't be powered. and the block and the T flip-flop would be in the bottom. And then once you go to start, you'd walk up, press the button, push it in, and then automatically stop, wait for your clay to dry out, and then mine all your clay, and then repeat. So as you can see, the farm is also properly lit up so that nothing will be spawning on any of the layers. So this is the mud farm that I'm currently using to get the mud for the clay farm over here. And this is actually a modified version of one by Sleeping Prince, and I'll have the link to his tutorial down in the description. This isn't a tutorial, it's just to kind of show you my modifications on his to make it a lot easier. First of all, I have a little option right here to where you can turn this into a concrete powder instead of just mud farm. You'll have to excuse this, I was doing mud in here instead of dirt just for testing. This will normally be dirt. So this little waterlogged leaf block here makes it to where you could push concrete powder all the way through and it would turn to concrete right next to here. If that was concrete powder, that would turn to concrete and it would get blown up and you could harvest that. Or you can also use dirt in here and it will work the same way as my other one. If you don't have smart pistons that work, this will automatically push it for you. And here is a little smart dispenser that I've also added. I found this in an ENX04 video. Man is a genius. And so what this does is basically you can put all your shulkers for your materials for the farm on here and they'll load into this dropper. Whenever you do that, say we're getting mud bricks and you start it, it will automatically dispense them until you can't pick them up anymore and then it will stop instantly. So it's a little smart dispensing system. As you can see here, you'd be placing these and it places it, gives you exactly enough to give a little surplus whenever you're dispensing so you'll never run out. One more thing, if you're switching this farm onto concrete mode, all you would need to do is power this lever, which sends a redstone signal across over here, which locks this repeater, making it to where none of the dispensers will dispense any of their water bottles, which is required to make the mud, but breaks the farm if you want to make concrete. So this little smart switch makes it to where that doesn't happen. You can make concrete through here. Just make sure that it is off whenever you're doing mud. Additionally, we've had to kind of wire our own little TNT duper system here, but you can watch Sleeping Prince's video for what he does on that. And the last change is down here at the bottom. He just has some storage out front, but I've added this smart cart unloader by Il Mango. Completely optional, you can do this as however you want to do it, but this is the best way because it will just take all the items and instantly drop them off over here whenever this is unpowered. So say this is unpowered, let's just simulate that here. That happens whenever the farm starts. When that lever flicks up there, it sends the signal down and this cart will be constantly unloading and dropping all the items off in this little water chute down here. And we'll be picking all those up and dispensing into all these chests whenever the items go down. Okay, so how I use this farm is I get all of my dirt in my shulkers and I have space over here for 6 of them, but you can make more hoppers feeding into that dropper if you want for more capacity. So I get all that dirt and I just gather that and then I AFK here for a little bit because this is the fastest mud farm I could find. And then once all of that is collected, I take exactly 12.5 stacks or a little bit more if you haven't filled it up the whole feed tape system yet. And then you enter that in the clay farm. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and let me know if you make this in your world. And yeah, see ya.